Hi everyone, and welcome to another week of Pick Up the Mic. This is our fourth episode, and this time we have Maria Claridge, who is coming all the way from the south of England to tell us about her experiences in mental health. This episode will be looking at not just mental health, but the way it interacts with racial issues at the moment as well. So with us again, as usual, is Jeffrey and Ninoshka, and myself, Samuel. And so we're going to start with asking Maria if you would be so kind to tell us a bit about yourself.
Hi everyone, thank you so much for having me on the podcast. Lovely to meet you all. So my name is Maria, and I started my business in health and wellbeing over 3 years ago. I work as a personal trainer. I teach yoga. I'm also a life coach, and in my final year of my counselling degree. Yes, like Sam said, I'm based down south in Hampshire. And that's about me. I'm English, half Japanese. And I went to university in London.
Amazing. And what would you say is your favourite hobby or pastime?
I'm a big fan of sailing. Love sailing. Anything being outdoors and in nature, I think is really nice. I also enjoy writing. I've written a few books and working on some new projects. So really enjoy that as part of my downtime.
Amazing. And what's your book called? Just so if anyone's listening, they can look it up if they want to.
Oh, it's called This Girl Can, in brackets, Sometimes, and it's available on Amazon. So that's a book very much about key topics such as mental health, race, privilege, also some subjects that sometimes we find hard to talk about, such as suicide. If you're interested, check it out.
Is it on Amazon or something?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. So it's on UK Amazon.com, as well as available in Japan as well.
Nice.
Yeah.
Thanks, Maria. Thank you for that introduction. Can you tell me what do you think people can do to improve their mental health? Because obviously it's such an important part of themselves. Yeah,
well, I honestly feel it varies from individual to individual. So I can go through a few things that kind of work for me. And I think it's then a matter of what kind of clicks for you. So being out in nature, parks, the sea, the forest, engaging with animals, friendly dogs, seeing the birds, that kind of thing. I think meditation is a real game changer. You don't need to do long. 2 minutes, 2 minutes every day can really help calm the mind, and it really helps with anxiety. I am a huge fan of yoga. And again, yoga, you don't need to do a 60-minute sweaty yoga session. It can just be 5 minutes in the morning of just some gentle stretching just to get the body and mind working together. I think downtime and social time is really important. So just getting that right amount of time of sitting with your thoughts, being by yourself, but also having that time where you are engaging with friends. I know the pandemic has been a bit tricky, but hopefully I think we've all done one of the pub Zoom quizzes.
Oh, of course.
I think we'll be very glad not to do any of those anymore. For me personally, music, I love listening to music, getting creative, journaling or drawing. But above all, what's really important is just talking about it, just being able to say to someone, I'm just having a real rubbish headspace day, and just to be able to label that emotion of feeling down or feeling low or anxious. And it's just about taking away that stigma of those days when you're not having a good mental health day.
No, exactly. And especially because asking for help and stuff is something that, I don't know, you don't want to do because you feel like you can do everything yourself.
Yeah.
But we're not superhuman. So talking about it exactly is really important.
Exactly. And it's just important to note that if you're having a day where you're not feeling okay, like that's okay.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
So, thank you very much, Maria, for that answer. And I think, like Nanushka said, at the end, this whole idea of asking for help, especially for people from certain backgrounds like BAME backgrounds, is definitely something that has been said that it's seen as hard. And so I think people normalizing the idea of asking for help is definitely a huge thing. But now we want to move on to I guess looking at how other factors can affect mental health. So things like racial tensions, inequalities, and issues sort of relating to, socioeconomic status as well can have a huge impact on mental health. People have seen in the last year things with COVID leading to unemployment, specific groups within the population being at more risk of catching COVID as well as another thing. So I guess in your opinion, we just want to know, how have race relations, issues and inequalities affected mental health, whether it's the mental health generally of a population or just specifically in the UK? Feel free to answer whichever way you'd like.
Well, I just believe it's just deteriorated. The racial tensions are just higher than ever. I honestly believe that racism and mental health are really closely linked, and discrimination on the basis of race or ethnicity can cause or worsen mental health conditions. There's a lot of evidence now that racism have caused mental health conditions such as depression, anxiety, post-traumatic stress disorder, substance abuse disorder, and the most important one, suicidal thoughts. So this can occur in a number of ways. I just want to bring up a few of these ways that mental health issues have stemmed from. So have you guys heard of hate speech? Yeah, so I just want to clarify what hate speech is, just for any listener that doesn't know about hate speech. So it's just public speech that expresses hate or encourages violence towards a person or group based on something. That's really stemmed a lot of mental health issues. And it's not just, I just want to stress now and here that it's not physical health. Racism is actually is twice as likely to affect a person's mental health over their physical health. We also have prejudice. And that's prejudice is generalized beliefs that people apply to certain groups, including races and ethnicities. And these generalizations can be positive or negative, but either way, they have the potential to do serious harm. And also, I just want to note here, prejudice can also affect how healthcare professionals approach treating certain conditions of people of color, of the BAME. And I was really shocked to find a report based in the UK that found that Black people were more likely to experience harsh or abusive mental health treatment than over white people. And this study suggested that it could be due to the perception that Black people are dangerous, or they need results of punishment instead of therapy, which I found absolutely shocking. So moving on, we have oppression. And oppression is involving a group of people suppressing another group for their own gain. And this could be persecution, enslavement, and specific violence that targets people of color. But I just want to note that there are more subtle ways of oppression that affect people's daily lives. So this is happening day to day. For example, we all know there's racist jokes. You think they're lighthearted, but they can make people of a different race really uncomfortable, anxious, or unsafe, and it can be quite triggering. I know I'm speaking from me being English, half Japanese. I've experienced that in social groups where they've made jokes and passing comments, and you think it's all light and fun, but it gave me I got bullied for my eyes, because my eyes are slightly narrow, and I got bullied for that, and it wasn't very nice, and it gave me a complex about my eyes. And it's the sad thing is that over time, that these sort of jokes and comments can reinforce negative beliefs about ourselves, and we could then begin to internalize this, and this leads on to be known as internalized oppression. So yeah, it's just all of these things that are happening can really trigger those anxious feelings. It can spark depression. It can be quite traumatic. And if this is me talking about light bullying, if it's really severe bullying, the end result is someone takes their life over it.
Yeah, no, thank you for that. And I think definitely, like what you said, I think there's, I was listening to this podcast recording. It wasn't they weren't necessarily talking about like you were saying about like racial slurs or racial jokes, but they were talking about essentially how when they were younger, there were things that people would say that at the time, it wasn't seen as bad. Like I'm not saying that these people were young children or teenagers, and I'm not saying that the words they were saying were perfectly okay. But he was saying that so they were talking about I don't remember what the specific term was that they used. They were referring to people in the LGBTQ community. But the person was saying that someone used like this a bit of, I don't know what the word was, but he used a term that is seen now like today is quite controversial, and it's a word that you shouldn't use. But he was saying that the person who said it like apologized and said that he had no idea. And the person who was like doing this podcast talking about the person who said it was saying that that's one of the things as well, is that that people, obviously there are certain things that, there's topics or like, for example, like the N-word that people shouldn't be saying. But there's things that, there's words that maybe like 10, 15 years ago, or when you're growing up, they were things that you would hear all the time. Like I know, for example, like from a personal experience, I guess so I'm Nigerian, I'm black, and there were there were conversations you would have with people who they'd be surprised, with the way that I acted, just because I didn't fit the stereotypical black person. I don't speak like I'm from a certain part of London. I don't say bruv, or I don't dress a certain way. That you get certain comments like, one of the things that people love to say, even to this day, is that, like, calling people bounty because you don't act like, the stereotypical black person. And yeah, 100%. I do agree with you that these terms obviously now are seen as like, calling making comments about someone's the color of not the color of someone's eye, but their eye shape, or doing jokes on that is considered wrong. But
yeah, it's so damaging as well. You just 100%. Don't know, they could be laughing there with you at the time, but going home and then really internalizing it. And it's such a shame because it's so sad to see it's happening from such a young age. It's not just adults doing this, or it's teenagers, it's children as well. They're getting really anxious about wanting to fit in with their peers.
No, definitely. So yeah, I think definitely, and I think like you highlighted, there's especially when, I think more so in secondary school, there's this whole idea of, you have to fit in. Even, not just speaking from the UK, even in America, there's this whole idea of if you move somewhere new, or if you go upper school, so you go into middle school or high school, there's this whole tendency of I need to fit in, making an impression. And yeah, like you said, there are things that this whole idea of children doing things that they might not necessarily agree with, but because they want to fit in with the group, or they want to get make friends and do things like that. Yeah, it can be very, very damaging, not only to the person that, it's the words are being said to, but also to the individual participating in these actions as well.
Exactly. Also, I honestly feel people, when they use the N-word, they lack such education on the history of that word that they don't understand how damaging it can be to say that word. And I think I know we'll go into solutions a bit later, but really educating yourself on, if you don't know a word and it's potentially harmful or damaging, just don't use it. It's just, a lot of people are uneducated on history of terminology, and I think that's where it's going wrong.
Yeah, no, 100%, and I totally agree. And yeah, I think, like you said, I'll get into it later. But yeah, I think the whole idea you were saying of this need for education and educating individuals on this word, which you might not see, even like what people have raised is that the N-word, I guess more so nowadays, is seen as like, as an extreme. Like it's I would say most people would agree it's something that shouldn't be said. It's been something, in the last 10 years has sort of kept that, it's a word that shouldn't be used. But then there are other words to describe, different, and I won't go say those words, but there are other words to describe, other groups that people did say that, for example, that even though that, they're on the same level. Like this South African comedian I watch, his name's Trevor Noah.
Yeah.
He was saying. Yeah, honestly, anyone listening, I definitely recommend him on the Daily Show is incredibly funny. But he was doing a special. He was interviewed about in America of the use of the N-word, and was saying that in South Africa, I don't remember the word off by heart, but there was a word that was basically used to describe a certain group of people in South Africa, and he was saying that basically. Not only with I guess were using it when he said they were growing up, it was like commonplace. People would just use it, even not necessarily to that group of people. It could be like, don't be like this group of people and use the word. And he was saying that, after he was saying nowadays that word isn't used, and it's mainly not been used for two reasons. One, on the education, and second of all, it's just stopped being used. And he was saying that's, and we'll go, like you said, we'll go into it later on, but the whole idea of not using these words, saying, stamping it out from the get-go that these words aren't okay, letting children know that these words aren't okay from the get-go can actually mean that these words basically no longer get used nowadays, and they're only used in things like a historical drama or a documentary, but they're not things that you would hear people say. And yeah, that was one of the things he was saying about in South Africa, that's one of the things that's just ultimately happened. They had the word, and they just stopped stopped using it, stopped giving it power, essentially.
Yeah, exactly.
But yeah, like you said, to not, I guess, spoil what's to come.
Yeah.
We'll get into it later on.
Yeah, definitely.
But yeah, thank you very much for your answer.
It's also it's embedded in so much culture as well, is the issue. Is that they take on, so the words and these stereotypes, they'll use them instead of actual words. So instead of being like, oh, you're being stingy. So I was on holiday not that long ago, and someone was just like, oh, you're pouring your drink like a Jew. And I was just like you can't say that. That's just it's taking a stereotype and using it instead of a word. And again, they think it's a joke. They think it's it's just lighthearted humor or whatever, or just part of some. It's just woven into so much society. There's so many stereotypes where these words just come in and are used instead of actual words, and it's just so damaging. And again, like you said, it's coming in in the next question, but you just need to re-educate a culture. You need to re-educate to sort of I don't know, weed it out, but it still happens because it's just even if people do know it's wrong, sometimes it's just accepted in some way. But yeah.
Yeah, thanks for that, Sam.
Thank you so much for explaining that, Maria. So now that we've established the amount of impact and the damaging effects that this can have on people's mental health, how would you say individuals or communities can approach and tackle anxiety and depression surrounding these racial issues?
So I think in the moment, if someone said something to you that's inappropriate and you feel yourself getting anxious, or you're feeling this rage or build up within you, immediately just try breathing exercises, and this will really help prevent panic attacks. Any mindfulness you can do in that situation, walk away from the situation, and then when you're ready to process and digest it, start talking to your friends. And if it was your friend who said something racist to you, or for example, made a silly joke, it's about holding that friend, if you can, accountable for what they just said and the impact that it had on you. Finding support from your family and from your community is just so vital, because it can help your way of coping with racism. And also, I know we mentioned this before, but being able to talk openly about racism and any racist experiences, and maybe there's someone out there with a shared identity and can help you walk through these feelings of stress or frustration, anger. It's just finding your own little support network. So, for example, tomorrow, with the Stop Asian Hate movement going on in America right now, and it's kind of whittling into Southampton, a poor Asian doctor got attacked in the street purely because he was Asian. I'm joining a space tomorrow where we can all talk about our feelings and our experiences and kind of support one another. And this will really help. And it helps me manage mental health conditions, especially depression. And it reduces the isolation because you're with people and you kind of there for the bigger cause, and it encourages hope. I just really want to stress here that leaning into cultural identity as well. So if you are of mixed race or another race, a study in 2003, I think it was, suggested that having a strong sense of racial identity can be very protective against psychological distress caused by discrimination. And I know that racial identity is very unique to yourself, but learning that history of your family or your community and taking part in those activities or any traditions, finding those positive role models in mainstream media or not mainstream media, and it can all play a part to help you cope and manage racism. I just want to mention here, so in Japanese, we have this term called nakama, which translate into allies. And basically, you have your allies, your team, and everyone in your team is responsible to dismantle racism. So people who are not subject to racism, but are actively trying to stop it in solidarity with people of the BAME community or of color of different race. It's not enough just to say, oh, I'm not racist because I don't get involved in it. You need to be actively anti-racist. And it's that support group you have within you, that within your group, that you can all learn about racism and the history of it, and just going back to that point of educating ourselves about racism, so we are knowledgeable and in a better position to challenge it. So when the Black Lives Matter movement happened, I read books, I listened to experience of people of color. I learned about the history of racism in the UK as well as across the world. It's also a good thing to learn about current behaviors, practices, laws, and all institutions that impact people. And me going into becoming certifying as a counsellor, I was shocked to find that Black patients in particular are treated differently from white counsellors, which was really, really, really sad. But the solution there is, when I have a client and I don't know much about their background or their history or their race, you bring it into that safe space, you address it and talk about it and say, okay, I notice you are mixed race. Can you tell me a bit about that and what's that like? Because your experience will always be different to a client's experience. I just feel like all of us just need to take responsibility and provide support to those people that need it, and really, really contribute into creating safe spaces. And the key factors here, with no judgment, no questioning, no trying to fix it, allowing the space for people to express how they feel, what they need, and give them the chance to dominate that space. It's about really protecting people's safety. And, if there's triggering content like videos or violence against people of race, it's being aware of that this could be potentially damaging, and showing that to the children as well. If you're showing constantly films where you get someone of race is always a villain and those sort of things, what are you telling your children? What are the children going to grow up thinking? And I just want to stress, confront racism. There's been so many times that I've at school taken a back seat because I wasn't aware of it really and didn't really want to take accountability, I guess, for it. But my friend and I recently had a chat where if one of our friends is being, making those jokes that are inappropriate, or we're spotting something that's not on, we bring it up and we can talk about it, and we hold each other accountable for confronting racism. Even, my town is very white and very privileged. So a lot of people here, they don't really get it. But I'm having those open conversations with them. And as long as they're open to talking, it creates a conversation and it creates a direction of change. So it's just making the invisible visible. It's disarming those microaggressions, and you don't need to publicly humiliate that person. You can just take them to the side and speak to them privately. And it's about educating that person on why their words or actions are harmful, if not to you or to your friend, or just standing up for the people that are experiencing this directly.
Yeah, amazing. Yeah. And I like the two approaches that you had for that, where you had an internal individual level approach where it's about nurturing your own identity, which is so important, because like you were saying, if you involve yourself in the rituals, if you involve yourself in that community, then what might be a joke in mainstream communities, what might be looked down upon or laughed at as being strange, if you're able to be amongst your community and be in your culture, be in that where your identity isn't a joke, it's an actual reality that you're living, you're nurturing, then that's just so important, because that means that when you do go out there and someone does laugh or make a snide comment, you can be like, you're coming from a place where your identity is like
strong and
strong.
Yourself. Yeah,
definitely.
Yeah, because my school was like pretty much white. I was the only Asian girl in there was one other Asian boy in the year above, and this is a microaggression. People instantly assumed we were related because we were both Asian. And I was really ashamed of my Japanese heritage and my culture. I didn't tell my friends about when I visited Japan or shared any of my experiences with Japanese culture, because I had comments when I used to have a Japanese style lunch that they were like, that's so weird. How can you eat that? And it just made me feel really anxious and made me not want to, I was ashamed of being half Japanese. And it's so sad to look at that experience back then. And now I'm really proud of being Japanese because I embraced it. When I came to London, I think that's a great thing about London. It's so diverse. There's so many cultures. It's just unfortunate that the town where I'm from, everyone is pretty much white. So lack of diversity there. But yeah, it's about owning your culture and being proud of it as well, and just knowing yourself.
Yeah, sorry. And I just wanted to add on to that. So yeah, it's two points from what you raised, Maria. So the first one about identity, yeah, definitely 100% agree. And I think with coming out from that with two aspects, so I think it's really important that you did raise people from multiple backgrounds. Definitely need to not find their sense of identity, but find their own, like you said, the one that they relate to the most. Because I know that there are some mixed race people who are half black or half white or half of two different cultures, but they might only see themselves as one of those things. So a mixed race person who might be from the UK and from Nigeria, they might only see themselves as black because that's what, as soon as someone sees them, that's what they were growing up with. But I know one of my I love this musician called Logic. He's a rapper in America, but honestly, I definitely recommend his music. I know I've been making a lot of recommendations in the last couple of even in this one, but I definitely would recommend his music.
Such good messages.
Yeah, honestly, he really does, and he definitely, with the idea of identity, he brings it up a lot in his music, because I think he's either a quarter or 1/8 black, but when you look at him, individuals might assume that he's just white, or he might be white or from also from Latin America or South America. But he was saying, in his music, he says that people just dismiss that, and he says no, his parents and he's learned about all this, and he I'm pretty sure he identifies himself as Black, but
Yeah.
like he said that like all the things that he's grown up with, like his parents going through issues, even like I know he did it as a comedy thing, but I know like Trevor Noah said that as well, because he was saying like when he was younger, obviously he grew up in apartheid, where at the time, like for anyone who doesn't know, that was a time period in South Africa similar to what was happening in America, when it came to the civil rights movement and Black people and white people in America being separated. It was the same thing with South Africa, but it was very serious. So like even in South Africa, he was saying that technically him being born and him being himself was a crime, because like Black and white people just weren't supposed to mix. And he said there were times when he'd be walking like with his parents, and his dad would like if they saw like a police officer, or if they weren't walking in their local area and had gone somewhere else, they would just like his dad would walk on the other side of the road, and he would be walking with his mum. And he was saying that this was commonplace. So yeah, definitely, I guess I like definitely identifying with yourself. And finding your own cultural identity is definitely key to like tackling this. And I guess even for someone who's not from from multiple backgrounds, so not from a number of places, even as an individual, being comfortable with your own culture. So like I said before, I'm Nigerian, but and I definitely agree with you. My school, I wouldn't say it wasn't like my school was in London, but it was like I wouldn't say the edge, but not necessarily central London. And there were definitely more like white students there. There were still, some Black students and some Asian students as well. But even like as an individual myself, like I wouldn't, for like a long period of time when I was young, I didn't really like wearing like so I'm from the Yoruba, which is one of the tribes in Nigeria. And I didn't really feel comfortable wearing, like a natural dress. Partly because, like you'd see any time you wore it, people would make a big deal out of it. And you're just like, it's just like, what, like it wasn't necessarily always like, like, why are you wearing this or this looks bad? But it was more of like you said, those microaggressions that you might sometimes see. But yeah, I just got to a point where, no, I was actually like, I really love, I learned more about my history. I really found, myself and my culture. And I honestly love history. I love learning about cultures. And like you said, like learning, and I think also like learning about other cultures as well.
Yeah.
Because like, yeah, because myself, I love, I love Japanese culture. I did Japanese for GCSE. I've never been, and honestly it's on my bucket list to do, because I definitely want to go. But yeah, me and my brother, we love like learning about the culture, and and that's one of the things that we've raised before, even like tackling issues within communities. So like I keep forgetting who did this, but this Instagram page had a post about this, and they were saying that culturally tackling some issues that are like worldwide issues, like for example, when it comes to, like you said, with the I apologize because I don't remember the Japanese. It was I don't want to say it wrong. The Japanese word used to describe like team.
Nakama.
Yeah. So even like that, there isn't necessary. There might, while team is a word in English, the meaning behind it isn't the same.
Yeah.
And they were saying like even when it comes to like tackling like issues like climate change, that there's words in certain cultures that mean like you would be doing like sustainable practices. So whether it's like I don't remember any of them off the top of my head, but there were words that meant like using like a gift. So if someone gave you a gift, or if you bought yourself something new, you use it to the point of basically it can't be used anymore. It's not that after a couple of times you feel like I feel like buying something new. No, like this word would mean like using it to its like fulfilling its purpose basically. And yeah, I feel like that's definitely one of the things that in English we might not have words like that, or they might not carry the same meaning, but other cultures do, and using and understanding these cultures will be a huge asset to helping to tackle whether it's issues like climate change, issues like racism. And I think the second thing that you said about like you said, like having these conversations is definitely true. Obviously, there are issues around the world, and I think especially in the, not in the last year, but, there's a tendency to just forget about the wider world. You just focus on the issues that affect you sometimes. And it's just remembering that, just because, like, for example, just because, like you said, like with Black Lives Matter, or with, all this, the Asian hate rallies the anti-Asian hate rallies, and to tackle Asian hate in both, well, basically worldwide. Things like that, even while I might not necessarily be Asian, I can, use like you said, like use my platform to support, whether it's, having these conversations, putting, signing petitions, putting things in, like information in my story to educate people, is definitely a huge thing. And, I think, like you said, these conversations definitely are not, sometimes they're not easy. And they can definitely, change not necessarily only how you view an individual, but how you view like organizations as a whole, whether it's, an organization had an issue if it comes to racism or things like that. But you have to have these conversations if you actually want to make a change.
Exactly. You can't just sit back anymore. It's not one of those situations. You need to be actively anti-racist.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
And even and that was one of the things that even like regarding, I guess, a life after COVID, and, when we're, I guess, back to how things used to be, is one of the things that I've discussed with a couple of people, was this idea of, everyone's been saying, like, we're going to go back to, normal. We're going to have a bit of more sense of normality. But then one of the things that people have raised, and, I've raised this myself, is in the last year, we've seen, like, I guess there's been a spotlight, especially when it's come to racial tensions, whether it's Black Lives Matter, anti-Asian hate, whether it's, anything, like, we've seen a whole year of, like, issues arising. And I think that was one of the things that I did sort of wonder. Everyone's saying, we're going to go back to a sense of normal, but the question is, should we? Because normal, for certain groups is different. For African Americans in America, normal, it means like being stopped and searched more often than their non-African American counterparts. Normal for certain groups. So for certain groups, that certain people who are Asian would be if it's in certain airports, being seen as potential threats if the person's speaking a different language. Because I know the BBC did, I think it was Channel 4, did like a sketch on it. This guy was speaking this guy was from, I don't know where he's from. It was like a TV show, but he was speaking I think he was speaking Arabic. But this white person on the bus, who obviously didn't understand it, was like getting furious, and it was all part of an interesting sketch. And she was just like, "Oh, why are you, why are you speaking that? You're in England, speak English." But he was, and the whole situation was diffused on the bus, and they made the person who was trying to fuel everything and make it worse. But yeah, that is one of the things that does happen. And I guess my thing is, while we're in, the world's basically almost stopped at this point. And there was a point where, that we weren't doing anything other than just staying at home, looking after ourselves, and I guess reflecting on everything that's happened. And I guess my thing is, should after a lockdown and after COVID's basically, hopefully gone, should we go back to normal? Shouldn't we then say, the world's literally stopped at this point? We should use this as a point to I guess like a soft reboot. To say, like, all these issues, whether it's climate change or racial tensions, or the way how we view women in society. Why don't we use this past year to say, clearly there's an issue. We've seen even a year where most people are still at home. There's been like all these issues happening. Why not use this time to be like, okay, we're going to come out of COVID and we're going to use this time to be like, no, we're actually going to try and improve the world. So I think that's one of the things that definitely, I think, like you said, this whole idea of having these conversations, people shouldn't feel like, like once COVID's gone, this suddenly means that this hate or this racial tension just disappears with it. No, it clearly will still be there, and it'll be there until everyone, gets along with each other. But we just need to start to develop, to say like, no, we don't want things to go back to normal with everything. Obviously, we still want to, go out, meet friends, not have to socially distance. But we, in some other aspects, we want to actually change things. We want things to be more, society to be more accepting to people from other races or other religions or other cultures that are different from ours. So yeah, definitely, I would definitely agree with that.
So yeah, thank you, Maria, for that answer, and Jeffrey for what you were saying. It's really, really interesting, actually. And like both of you are saying, it's so important to address, these issues surrounding race, and what you were saying, Maria, of confronting racism and not just kind of sitting back and letting it happen, because it's becoming so much more common in society. And again, like you said, it's not enough to say, I'm not racist. You have to proactively show it. It's not enough to say, yeah, I'm just not. Because in this day and age, it's just, there's a lot of racism going on. And, in turn, that has a knock-on effect on people's mental health. And yeah, it just has to be addressed, basically. But what are you planning to do now in the future? And how easy do you think it would be for other people to achieve some of the goals that you're setting yourself?
A little bit of what I'm up to right now. I've just finished writing a sequel to my children's book, The Half-You Child, which addresses the first book addressed being mixed race in a white primary school, and how the child is basically myself as a child, and how she begins to embrace her Japanese culture. And the sequel is now about managing anxiety. So it's a bit of a well-being book. Because this might come to a surprise, but I had a client as young as 6 who was really suffering from anxiety. It's really sad. I think with technology and mobiles and all the Snapchat, TikToks, and kids just so young getting mobile phones, it's causing a lot of anxiety within young children. I'm also working on another book called Okay, Let's Talk, which addresses mental health and racism through a variety of characters from different backgrounds. And basically from the counselling perspective, where I tell it from a Black client's perspective and then the white counselor's perspective, and how they interpret the conversation in completely different ways. And there's just, trying to find that common ground. So I've been quite active. I went to the protest for the Stand Up to Racism and the Black Lives Matter protest in Southampton. I read out a poem on the Stand Up to Racism Day. I'm part of this refugee drama group, which is absolutely full of amazing, strong people, called World Stages Now. And we've just received our second grant and producing a film based on the book, Okay, Let's Talk. So I think when you say what can one do, just get involved and start having those chats with your friends. Like even if you're you don't know what you're talking about, do your own research. Don't just turn to that token Asian friend or that token Black friend where you're like, I don't know what I'm meant to be doing. Do the research yourself and have those conversations, because I guarantee they'd be open to having these conversations with you. Also, talk about those hard topics. If you're feeling down, or you're having a really tough day, or you've experienced something that was really not on, have those conversations. But just having that access to open up about your personal experiences. And I myself, I'm really making sure that I hold my friends accountable. We were a social distance gathering the other day, and my friend made it, a silly ninja comment to me. And I took her aside. I was like, that's not on. Like, you can't, that's not appropriate. It's not, I didn't find that funny. And she realized that and apologized. And now I feel like she's a little bit more aware. But my overall goal is to keep working with people in health and well-being, in particular those struggling with mental health. And I think that's my life's work, and I'll continue to do so. And the more we can talk about this, the better we can all together manage it.
That's so true. That's a really good answer. Thank you.
Oh, thank you.
Wow, thank you very much for that, Maria. It's been great to have you on the show. But before you go, we've got one more question to ask you. It's important. You seem very passionate about this subject, and you've given us a lot to think about. You've given our listeners a lot to digest, and to take this virtually take home with them. But yeah, I guess the main thing that we want to know right now is who inspires you, because you've got this strong passion for mental health, and raising how race is definitely a huge factor when it comes to not only getting treatment for mental health, but also dealing with it as well. But we want to know who inspires you to be this passionate.
I think I'm going to have to say my mum for sure. She's been my absolute rock, and she's such a strong character, and I have that drive to make change and difference in life. I think because of the way my parents raised me, and I definitely would say my mum and my family. I also think some of my really close friends, daily they inspire me with what they're doing, and especially one friend in particular, Lexi. We have those open conversations about race, and she gives me that space to be vulnerable and emotional about anything that's bothering me, and when I'm having bad days. And my clients as well. All my clients really inspire me when they, even if it's a personal training session, they put the work in. And if we are having those open conversations, they're open to having those conversations. So I think it's probably more the immediate surrounding people in my life that I draw inspiration from. But I just feel if everyone had that feeling of like I could make a small difference. It's not small. It could be if everyone had that feeling, it'd be a huge difference. We could change how everything's turning out right now. It's just all about wanting to make that small difference, and that's just starting with yourself.
Yeah, definitely. No, thank you for that. And yeah, I think, like you said, just doing these, even if it's like small changes for now, as you progress in life, doing bigger changes later on, like doing these changes will have like a huge impact. Like having these conversations with friends can lead to them then having it with friends, and like that snowball effect of it just becoming something bigger.
100%.
Definitely. So yeah, thank you very much for that.
No, thank you so much for having me on the show.
So yeah, thank you very much, Maria, for all the wonderful insight you've given us today. Before we go, everyone, as you know, we've got our MC of the month, and this month's MC is Mind, or Mind UK, as they're sometimes known. Mind are a mental health organisation. They do a lot tackling the subject. So they look into, offering support not only to, to individuals of what you yourselves and some of the stuff that Maria said, as individuals you can do, but they offer also, insights to organizations and, businesses to how they can, support the mental health of their employees. Obviously, as we've all been in a national, not even global, I guess, pandemic, and we've been in this lockdown, in and out, and it's, had a huge impact on mental health. And they've been releasing a lot of, documents and resources for individuals, workplaces to have these conversations. And they do a lot of campaigns as well to raise, issues that need to be addressed. So whether it's, the idea of, now that we're all at home, I think especially at the start, one of the things that people saw was there was a tendency that people would keep working late. It'd be like, okay, I'm working from home. I started maybe an hour later, or, I've got this big piece of work I now need to do. I'm not in the office, so I can now do it at home. Then they raise it as an issue that needed to be addressed. But they've also raised about other factors. So like we said today about the whole idea of, mental health and race. So they've not only raised written reports and written articles on their website about that, but they've also pledged to say that they want to become a truly anti-racist organization, which I think is amazing. And just to give a bit of insight to what they've said right now, like in their plan for the future that they want to do is they want to have a program of working with young Black men to build services around their living experience. They want to campaign to end racial disparity in the use of the Mental Health Act. So that linked into what we was talking about before, that Maria raised of, certain people, whether it's people from Black backgrounds, instead of having these conversations and looking for other forms of treatment, you go straight to that one form of treatment, and then it's not used properly, or they get sectioned as well. But they also want to use their local services to tailor to the needs of diverse communities, because obviously, as Maria said, different communities have different needs. Where she grew up, was majority white, and that will have a different experience to someone who grew up in London, or even within London itself, North London and East London and South London, West London, all different, diverse communities. So I think they're on the right track. And for an organisation, in this day and age, to admit that we can do more and truly pledge to becoming anti-racist is definitely something that I think is definitely great. So they're our MC for the month.
Yeah, thanks everyone for coming to our 4th episode, and again, thank you so much, Maria, for all the words and everything you've given to us here. And don't forget that her book is This Girl Can Bracket Sometimes by Maria Claridge. I'm not trying to set it off or anything, but we'll look into it. It's there. Really loved all the discussions, and the importance of identity, the importance of being an ally and being a protector of any minority group out there, even LGBTQ plus identity also is such an important thing. And it's important in universities because this is the first step that people really take in their adult lives, and identity comes into such a clash here because there are so many different identities, so many different ethnicities, races, religions, sexualities, everything. It's a completely innovative experience for anyone. So anyone at university, so important, but also going into jobs, going into the adult world afterwards is also, basically at all times. But yeah, thank you so much, Maria. Thank you, Jeffrey, and thank you, Ninoshka, for another amazing episode.